Hello and welcome to the channel of Hashaliach once again. Trust that God is blessing you. And today is the 4th of September 2024. Okay, another message. Very similar in the way it came around as to yesterday. It's not a similar message as yesterday, but the way the message came. So this morning, I was chatting to my wife and she started to speak, and I was sort of half listening to her, but she was saying something like, we're often like King Saul in that we don't wait on God and therefore we're not obedient to God. So I was kind of half listening to her about that. But then she said something really interesting. She said, it's like in the beginning, God, but instead we replace it with in the beginning, I, in the beginning, me. Put yourself first. And this will become more apparent as I give the message, but I thought that was very profound. So anyway, we we study every day and we go through the Old Testament and the New Testament, and normally we'll read Proverbs and we read something out of the New Testament, something out of the Old Testament. But we neither of us realized that we were going to be in 1 Samuel 13. This story is very specific to what I'm just talking about. So let me begin in 1 Samuel 13, and I'm going to begin in verse 11 and just read 11 to 14. And this is a situation where King Saul, has been instructed specifically by God what to do. They're about to go into battle, but he has to wait on Samuel to come and do the offering. So that's very brief background. But 1 Samuel 13, verse 11, the complete Jewish study Bible. Shmuel, that's Samuel. Samuel said, "What have you done?" Saul answered, "I saw that the army was drifting away from me, that you hadn't come during the time appointed, and that the Philistines had assembled at Michmash. I said, now the Philistines will fall on me at Gilgal, and I haven't asked the favour of Adonai. So I forced myself and offered the burnt offering." Samuel said to Saul, "You did a foolish thing. You didn't observe the mitzvah of Adonai. You didn't observe the command of God, which he gave you. If you had, Adonai would have set up your kingship over Israel forever. But as it is, your kingship will not be established. Adonai has sought for himself a man after his own heart, and as we all know, that's King David. And Adonai has appointed him to be prince over his people, because you did not observe what Adonai ordered you to do." So this fit in very well with what my wife was saying um, first thing this morning. And when we read this, we sort of became convicted by it, and maybe you'll become convicted by it. How many times, and I've seen this so many times in my life, our life, that sometimes God turns up way past the 11th hour. We think he has to move within a set time frame that we have in our own head. But that's not God's way. He tests us. What should come out of this message is obedience and patience. Obedience and patience. It is very clear from verse 13. Let me read it. Samuel said to Saul, "You did a foolish thing. You didn't observe the command of God which he gave you." So it's very obvious that a command had been given to King Saul by God. And Samuel declares to him, he said, you've done a foolish thing. You didn't obey what God spoke to you. Now, if we just go back to verse 6 in the same chapter, let me read to you from 6 to 8. The men of Israel saw that their options were limited. So now the Philistines are assembling against Israel, and the battle is not far off. The men of Israel saw that their options were limited and that the people felt so hard pressed. The people felt so hard pressed. Are you feeling hard pressed at the moment? That they were hiding themselves in caves, thickets, crevices, watchtowers, and cisterns, while some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan to the territory of Gad and Gilead, but Shaul was still in Gilgal, where all the people were eager to follow him. He waited 7 days as Samuel had instructed, but Samuel didn't come to Gilgal. So the army began to drift away from him. So now the army begins to drift away from King Saul. Bit of panic setting in here. He's a bit hard pressed. And he goes on to make the sacrifice himself. Like yesterday, I felt an urgency to give that message yesterday, and so I did. The same happened this morning, and it's coming about in the same way. We seem to be in a season of where my wife's saying something, and then confirmation comes through the scriptures. And it's cold this morning, and upstairs it's nice and warm. And I sat upstairs and I thought, I'll come down later and do this message. But I felt God prompt me through it. It's like he was commanding me. Are you going to be obedient? Are you going to listen to the command I've given you and just go and give the message? I think a lot of us are feeling hard pressed at the moment. I certainly am. I can't speak for you. I'm feeling hard pressed. Things are closing around me, and the stress and pressure is on. And a few times in the last few weeks, I've come up with some pretty wild ideas about what I am going to do. In the beginning, I have decided. But the scripture says in the beginning, God spoke. And God spoke to Saul. And God has spoken to me. And I've no doubt God has spoken to you. Are you feeling hard pressed? Has God not turned up in the time frame that you have given him? And now you're going to take action in direct disobedience to what God has spoken to you. Samuel said to Saul, you've done a foolish thing. And now you're not going to get to have your kingdom. Now, it took many years for that to come to its full fulfillment. But Saul could have achieved so much more if he hadn't been so presumptuous, if he had trusted God more. See, we walk by faith, not by sight. Saul looked at the circumstances. The army was starting to desert him because Samuel hadn't turned up. But God had already spoken to Saul. He'd given him a command, and Samuel tells us that. He says, you haven't obeyed the mitzvah, the command of God that he gave you. And so he took it upon himself to offer the sacrifice. And that was not his job. He was disobedient. The reason I think that the Lord has brought this message at this time is because although we have been through a very difficult time of what's been going on in the world, and our patience seems to be getting stretched and stretched and stretched, and everything's wearing thin. We can't go on anymore, is how many of us feel. But God is saying, you just hang in there. You be obedient to me and wait for me to turn up. Don't take matters into your own hand. Don't do a foolish thing. Do not do a foolish thing and go off on your own path. Just wait on the Lord. It's quite a hard message because I was convicted of this first. It's hard, just waiting. But you see, the good news is that God has got the victory. He's already won, and He wants us to join Him in that. As we wait on God, we've just got to have that patience. We've got to remain obedient. So just keep your head in the Bible, keep reading the scriptures, keep praying and praising. That's the encouragement I'm giving you, because that's the encouragement I'm giving myself. Don't be a King Saul. Don't do a foolish thing. Obey the command that God has given you. Until next time, God bless you.